Why I didn't turn against SJWs sooner. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I'm gonna do yet another improvisational video. So I was thinking and talking today on a live stream about how in my past I used to hang out with a whole bunch of SJWs, a whole bunch. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of SJWs, and I still am connected to thousands of them really on social media. I don't actually hang out with them. I go out of my way to avoid them in real life because, it's gotten to the point where they're absolutely insane and they physically attack people. And there's rumors about me that, I don't know if people would want to physically attack me or something. That's probably taking it a bit too far, but it might not be. So I don't actually hang out with these people, but they all know who I fucking am for various reasons. And why didn't I know that these people were a problem? Why didn't I know that they would end up becoming so awful and so terrible? I think that there's a few reasons for this. For one, I don't think that all or even most of them always were. I think a lot of them were people that were like me, who were relatively non-committed to any sort of political thought and just generally artistic people who believed in diversity, who happened to end up being leftists because in years past, especially if you were LGBT, we assumed that Republicans were evil because they were the ones that were trying to pass, to make it so that it was constitutionally illegal that gays would never be married during the Bush years. And Republicans were the ones that ignored the AIDS crisis in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was in office. So in the LGBT community, it is assumed that conservatives are all bad. That was just an assumption. So we gravitated towards leftist circles because that was sort of our safety zone. And we knew people who were really into the politics, but a lot of us weren't. I would say probably the majority of us weren't, but we still assumed that the people in the leftist circles who were political were good, that they had good motives and they were trying to fight for good things. However, at least in my case, and I know for certain in many friend of mine's cases, we didn't actually really like the activist people. When we would talk to people who were activist organizers, who were, hardcore feminists, who were hardcore anarchists, who were self-described Marxists and communists, all these types of people who often almost unanimously ran in the same circles. When we would hang out with those people and talk about politics too much, we didn't really like them. We were like, oh, God, anarcho-communism, how does it work? Huh? Okay. Yeah, and, we'd be talking to them at a party or something, or at some, some queer arts event or some crap like that, and they'd be explaining anarcho-communism, and we'd be like, okay, yeah, you're full of shit. Yeah, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, that's dumb. That's just fucking dumb. And that's what our reaction would be. But at the same time, we still felt like they were part of our tribe or something, because that's how things were. That being a part of the queer scene attracted a lot of those types of people. And we still assumed that all of us were united in something rather good. And I never really explored the greater politics that held it together, which it is held together by greater politics, it turns out, especially now that they're starting to lose power. They are fighting to keep the cohesion together so viciously. It's so obvious the way they're trying to demonize white gay men or black men and say that we're traitors to the community, blah 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 blah, because they think that they're losing us. They think that they're losing their troops. So it's very, very obvious that there was something that was, felt confident that they were holding us all together. And so these people who were Marxist, anarchist, blah, 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 that were amongst the queer community, the far leftist community, there had to be some element of cohesion. They had to be some people that were kind of running the show. And I see that more and more in retrospect, looking at the way that the art festivals were set up and how they would prioritize queer people, or they would prioritize sex workers, or they would prioritize queer, trans, people of color, and all these different things. I think that they were doing that because it fit this ideological framework that if they could get people to be subtly on board with that, they could get people to be on board down the line with the greater agenda, which turns out to be, in so many cases, it turns out to be communism, which I thought was taking it too far for many years. I did not think that many of these people were communists, but it kind of turned out that a lot of them, if you really followed the system of orders, followed the chain of command, it turned out to be a lot of communism. And that's what I was sort of mixed up in, even though I didn't know it and I didn't want to know about it. I didn't want to know that these were people that had such bad politics, because every time I would talk to them about it, they were just so annoying. But I didn't know that there was even potentially other options. I didn't know that there was other entire social universes that I could hang out in. And maybe there weren't. Like, maybe at that time, the libertarian crowd just wasn't going to be anybody that I had anything in common with. And they were going to think I was weird for being gay because there weren't that many gay libertarian type people, I don't know. And I don't identify as a libertarian necessarily, but I have a lot more in common with libertarians at this point than I do with leftists. So regardless, I didn't know, and I kind of didn't want to know. And I think that a lot of people were similar. And it took me being at a point in my life when I had a lot of free time and I was on social media a lot, and I got into some particularly bad altercations with feminists that had taken over and were holding hostage online communities that were supposed to be for gay men, and feminists had taken hostage these online gay male communities and were banning gay men left and right and calling them misogynists. It took that to really, really get me inspired to learning about feminism and social justice and all of it. And I started to really, really investigate, like, where is all of this coming from? And I started learning about patriarchy theory and how that is related to when the current anti-racist model has to do with this notion that white men invented the white race to oppress everybody and blah, 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 blah. And it all kind of ties together by way of intersectional feminism. And then you really look at where that is going, and it kind of turns out that it's communism, and it sort of does seem like they want minority groups to sort of be the aristocracy, their preferred minority groups, as long as they are sort of communists. That's kind of what it looks like. I know that not every SJW has any idea of that, but that's what it starts to look like. And that's what a lot of the leaders, the high-ranking people, the Yvette Falarkas and the Shanta Drivers of BAM are probably, full-blown communists. And they would put us up against a wall and shoot us if we exposed their flawed ideology for the way that it not only wants wealth redistribution, but it wants to force people to pick up the tab. It wants to demonize people who are productive. And it's not simply that, oh, everybody should work to the best of their abilities. It's saying that people who have a high level of achievement and a high level of productivity are actually bad somehow. So they basically deserve to work for the benefit of everybody else. Because that's the only way that this stuff makes sense. You can't just expect there to be wealth redistribution, because there's always going to be some people that are more productive and some people who aren't more productive. So the only way to come up with a true communist system is to somehow say that the people who are going to be producing the most and therefore giving up the most deserve that. They deserve to have to do that because somehow they had done something wrong, even if they hadn't. Somehow these are bad people for being productive. That's the only way it works. And and then they started basing it around immutable traits, and it turned into like white men, and now Asian people are demonized, and basically anybody who's productive is demonized, and it's just a mess. It's just a mess. So it took me a really long time to really investigate that, because I didn't want to know, I guess. I wanted to believe that the people who were around me, who were politically active, who were doing political activism, and I was sometimes working with on artistic projects and sometimes organizing shows and stuff with, I wanted to believe that they were up to something good, and they simply weren't. But the silver lining to this, and this is what I'm going to close with, is that I think that due to the widespread nature of all of social justice culture and all of this, and the fact that, SJWs are constantly attacking each other and constantly calling each other racist, and, we're heading up on Halloween again, and so cultural appropriation is constantly being brought up, and people are being demonized, and there's always another microaggression, and there's always... Eventually, I like to think that more and more people who lay dormant, kind of like people who mixed with SJWs and who would be against it if they truly understood what it was, they're going to start to be aware of what it is, and they're going to start to question it and learn about it. Because the only way that I think it really, really succeeds is by way of disguising itself and saying that it's, oh, we're just here to help the disadvantaged. We're just here to offer stuff to the little guy. We're just here to, help out people of color and trans people and the LGBT community and blah, 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 blah. When it turns out that that's just not true. What they're more concerned with is demonizing majority groups. They're more concerned with demonizing the system that we do have in place, overthrowing it. That's their real agenda, and they assume that that's going to help out the little guy. But of course, what we would actually have would be the inmates running the asylum if that were to actually happen, because the people who end up being most attracted to this mentality, they're delusional. They have a very flawed mental capacity for how they see the organization of the world and how it actually functions. Usually they have some sort of personality disorder. I believe they actually have a personality disorder that makes them susceptible to delusional thinking and susceptible to cult-like thinking. So that's what I believe is happening with the true believers. But there's a lot of people that were like me that just happened to mix with these people who never bothered to do the research into patriarchy theory and all of this, how these people believe that all oppression is connected, which, it's so funny. These people say that all oppression is connected. They think it's the white cis het patriarchy that's keeping all of us down, which I liken in a metaphor to it. That's kind of like saying if your house is cold, well, that's it's all connected. So it's all from the same source. It's from the patriarchy made your house cold, when really it's the fact that your electricity bill ran out, so you don't have heat, and you have a leaky roof. So, there's that. And then a few of your windows are broken. That's not connected. There's a lot of different factors. The world is complicated. I'm sorry. That's how, I'm no, sorry, not sorry. I'm not sorry for that, because I can't be. There's nothing that anybody can do to tell you that things are more complicated when you want to simplify them. I think that most people can see that if people remind them. But there's been a lot of people, there's been a very consolidated, precise, calculated media campaign. I believe that started in 2012 when Obama legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people by overturning the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 or 1947. When Obama did that, I think that he instituted he definitely legalized propaganda on the American people, and I think that he put it into universities, he put it on media, and he put it on blogs and social media. And I think that the combined effect of it being on social media had a bigger effect than anybody ever imagined, and made people profoundly paranoid, because the reality of everybody being put on display, being held to the standards of social justice, social justice purity, that became very, very terrifying. So people started following those standards because they felt that if they were to violate the standards, their life would be ruined. But very few people have actually bothered to really investigate what those standards actually are. And it's very hard to do that because there's a lot to it. It's a complicated thing, and it takes many hours, weeks, months to properly process what these people are actually saying and to form collective, cohesive arguments against them. And yeah, I'm one of the people who has decided to devote a large percentage of my life to doing so, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Bye.